At the entrance, the service drive, the book drop, everything is on the same face of the building. Again, not ideal to mix the pedestrians and the vehicular access across the same front. Then we took a look at the new construction. Again, this is the 90,000 square foot scheme. On the left is the site layout with the parking. On the right, we've just shown what an underground parking garage would look like there. Again, because the building's so big, it really takes up a lot of space on the site. We have to go to underground parking to kind of get the counts we need. The real problem we run into with this scheme isn't getting the right number of parking or anything, it's the expense of underground parking. At this point in time, we're far enough into it, CCS International started looking at some budget numbers for things, and parking could be upwards of $6 million underground for 60 spaces. That's not a good value. There's a reason that we only do that in heavy downtown areas because the cost is so high, it just doesn't make sense here. Again, looking at the 90,000 square foot program, we realized it's just too big for the site. We either have to make the site substantially bigger, we got to make the building smaller. Again, we assumed 75,000 square foot program for both these areas. And all this didn't happen independently. At the time, Julie and her staff were working with the program consultant, looking at ways to tighten up the building size. At the same time, we were getting a better idea that we could make this size building work for the site. As you do that, it starts to open up more parking space on the physical site area. It started to make, on the far left here, the scheme with the building all along the north, starts to make a lot of sense on the site. I think one of the things that makes too much sense is the driveway that goes straight across. What we learned from the library staff is people backed up on Route 59 are probably going to take that as a shortcut across, and that we need to offset that a little bit to make that less attractive to people. But that you can see that the site and the building start to work together a lot better. The other thing that we did in this scheme is we got a one-way service drive across the north end of the site. That's something we could start taking advantage of kind of the odd shape of the site to fit in a little bit more parking for staff up there. But then we start getting the one-way drive up there. It's much easier to get book drop, potentially a drive-up window, because this building, a new building, does not have to line up with the existing building. It's basically setting on grade. You can, in that case, we can have a drive-up window very easily that people can, not only can you drop off your books, you can pick books up. We looked at another version of that, kind of splitting the difference in the big scheme we had on that faced all on Route 59. This is an L-shaped scheme. You can see the parking and things doesn't lay out quite as efficiently. The building doesn't lay out quite as efficiently. It could work. The entrance is something you need to get kind of closer to the parking area. It's kind of hidden from Route 59. While it's workable, we just didn't feel it was as solid a scheme. But overall, I think eliminating the underground parking really reduced the cost of this approach, taking advantage of the staff. The parking at the top really works much better, the full service window. Everything is oriented towards the downtown area. The parking is very useful from downtown. We thought this worked out pretty well and could be made to work with a few site improvements. So we had these same discussions that we were having with the library staff, with the public and the task force group, and we reviewed all these different options. Everyone kind of agreed that the 70 to 75,000 square foot program looked like it made a lot more sense on the site, that it still made sense that the building faced downtown and provide clear access to downtown with easy access to the parking. People recognized that the renovation was going to be a little bit more expensive than they thought. It's going to be a major overhaul of all of the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, life safety systems. Also, when you consider all that, renovation takes longer. We can build a new building in 14, 15 months. Generally, an addition this size is still going to take 14 months. Then you have to close the existing library, move it over, work on that for another 7, 8 months, then open it up and move them back in again. All that costs money too. Net effect, as CCS International started putting the prices together, the cost of adding on to the building and getting the same quality of construction out of it end up being equal, if not more, than new construction, just because of the efficiencies that you have on the site with the new construction. So basically, we came back to Concept 2 of the new construction, again, this was pretty much unanimous from everyone we talked to in the public and the task force. This just was the most pragmatic solution to serve the long-term needs of the library. It's very efficient use of the site. Floor plans are simple, straightforward, easy to staff, easier to operate. Very flexible floor plans. We put a simple grid within the building. It can be easily amended in the future as library needs continue to change. There's a very strong connection to downtown Illinois Street and Route 59. The parking in this scheme is very convenient to the library entrance, but it's also convenient to downtown. The on-grade location really solves the accessibility and gives you a lot of flexibility in the long run. It makes the building much friendlier to enter into, much clearer, and the same for everyone, whether you have accessibility challenges or not. A few things we thought still needed to be worked on. We'd still like to inch the parking counts up higher. We want to offset the access drive from 59 so we don't get the crossover. And we want to improve the separation between kind of where we have the drive-up window at this point and where the main entrance is. It's better, it's off the end of the building, but you still have traffic coming out across where you have a fair number of people who'll be walking up to the building. Next slide, please. Next. So when we went in to design the building in more detail, other than just this approach to the site, we were working with the program consultant to kind of tighten up the spaces, get us from that 90,000 square feet down to 75,000 square feet. And one of the areas we found that we could really save space was in the meeting rooms. Libraries these days have a lot of programs. Your library has a fair number of programs for its size. When we open a new building, there'll be a lot more programs because this is something libraries are moving towards. There's a need for sometimes 250 to 300 people, quite often 100 people, even more often 50 people in meetings. One of the things we found that we could do in working with Julie was to combine 3 meeting rooms together and use movable walls to separate them or to join them. Now, a movable wall is something that's more of the whole wall slides up. It's not an accordion panel. It's far superior acoustically to that. So it gives you a true sense of being separated into different rooms, but when you open it up, you can take advantage of having all 3 of those rooms adjacent. So in this plan here, we've got a meeting room at the side here with the movable wall. We've got a terrace seating area, which I'll show you a little bit more in a second. Then we got a center area, and it's pretty much surrounded by movable walls. The center area, you can put one of these walls down and you get easily 150 people in that room, plus another 50 in the other space. Or we can put both walls up and have up to 290 people within that space. So we get a lot more flexibility out of it. It's a lot more interactive, and it kind of fits with the model that is merging to the forefront in modern library design. Now if you cut this through the center and looked into it from the side, we have this section down here. So this is the one room that's here, the center room here, and this is the terrace seating. And it's got a tiered level of seating. We're thinking that could be also used just for a general hangout space by youth and things during the day. It doesn't have to be closed off. It could be an active use area, but it also could serve to have easily kind of with the wall down, a discussion that could take place, a book panel, etc. But when you slide all those walls up into the structure above, you get a large space, and then the back half of the room is terraced up so everyone can see well within that same large space. So it really saved us almost 50% of the meeting room space that we were targeting, so it was a big advantage. A couple other things I want to point out in this diagram here that is important. As you can see, instead of having just a 3-story building at this side, we pulled the upper 2 stories back. It's something you'll see a little bit more as we go into the building design, but the intent at that point was to lessen the impact of the height of the building on the residential sides of the building, to have more of a transition and set the taller parts of the building back. The other thing is this rooftop mechanical area. Instead of just having mechanical units that sit on top of the roof, and you can put a wall around those, etc., but it makes the building look bigger, makes the building effectively taller. Instead of doing that, we're creating a well within the mass of the building where we set the mechanical units down within the well. And that does a couple things. It takes them out of sight. It helps reduce the overall feel of the mass of the building, but it also allows us to treat the walls with acoustical absorbent material and use the walls to direct sound upwards. So it controls the sound from the mechanical units in the area and takes the visual impact off of the neighboring spaces. Next. So we won't go into a lot of detail on the floor plans. We're not showing all the rooms at this point in time. We're kind of showing the general areas of the building. Frankly, that's for a couple of reasons. One is the library doesn't want to spend a lot of money to us to develop this while they're waiting to pass a referendum. We develop it as far as we need to make sure we can make it work. And that's as far as we go on it. But we do have some major planning concepts that we've gone through with the library. One is this kind of area in the center here designates kind of the main public area, the collection, the lobby, etc. That is always going to be located along the south facade of the building. We have a great opportunity with the way the building's situated on the site. We have a lot of access to south light. It's a big advantage these days. In sustainability, it's a big advantage. We can bring light into the building. We can turn off lights and reduce the power consumption of the building. It's also, we can take a real advantage along there. Also, the meeting rooms are located over in this area, and they're directly off the lobby. So we've got all the public spaces off the south facade of the building. Along the north is kind of more of the back of house space and the staff spaces. There's more of that on the first floor than on the other floor because we've got receiving rooms, mechanical rooms, water pump rooms, etc. We also, in this case, we've put the administrative staff and some additional staff areas down in this end. When you come into the building, we want the elevators and restrooms, something we call the core of the building, to be located relatively central in the building. And you'll see this as the building goes up, how that becomes more central. We also have an open stair that's located relatively in the center of the building. You come in and go up the stair and land over at the other end. That's a way kind of repositioning you as you go up the building without kind of having to walk as far. So we get a good flexible open floor space that can be adapted to future uses as well, and a lot of natural light. The first floor is very active with meeting rooms and the most popular collection. The second floor is also considered one of our really active floors. This whole floor is given over to youth services and young adult. It's a large open floor. We expect it to be a little rambunctious. It's not going to be the quietest floor. There'll be spaces that'll be laid out within it that will have walls for story time rooms, etc. We will have early literacy and learning, a tech center, group study rooms, story time rooms, parenting collection, grade school collections. There's a lot of things that are going to be expanded upon that the library has, and then more spaces than what they have now for these new activities. You know, it used to be when the library was designed originally, they wanted you to go in, get your book, and leave. Now people drop their kids off at the library. They expect them, they can spend 4 hours there easily. There are activities going on and things. These are things we want to be able to expand upon in the new building. So again, we've got most of the collection located down at the south end of the building, lots of natural light in that area. This area is actually walled off. That's the double height space for the meeting rooms. And we have a staff area that occurs kind of up in the upper corner on each floor. Next floor, please. This is the third floor. This floor will probably have a blast off from the floor below to limit the amount of sound that comes up to it. This is what we're calling the adult collection. It has the reference, nonfiction, and fiction spaces. That includes an information commons, computer training lab, digital media labs, local history, quiet study rooms, tutoring rooms, as well as the collections. Again, it's a big, open, free space where it can be rearranged readily. We understand the one thing we've learned about libraries is they don't stop changing. They're going to keep changing. They've changed faster than anyone predicted in 1989. They're going to continue to be a source of content. They're also a place now where you go to create content, and that's evolving. So we want to plan this as a simple building that can be adapted as things change in the future. On the far end here, this is that well I was talking about where the mechanical rooms are behind this wall and within a sunken-in space within the building. Next slide, please. So this brings us back to the floor plan of seeing how that's developed on the site. Again, this is Lockport along the bottom, about 59 Illinois Street. The building's located across the north end of the site. We get the service drive, the one-way service drive that we can have the book drop and a book service and a service window where you can both check out and return books. We get the service located across the top. We have a lot of parking along the bottom. We've maximized how much parking. We've developed a little bit more of a green area at the entrance to the building. I think one of the key moves we're trying to do is we're trying to soften the entrance to the building. Route 59 is a busy street. We're locating the entrance away from it. We want it to be at the quieter end of the site. We want to introduce some more quiet activities, some green planters and so forth that you can sit at just outside the entry area and transition to kind of more of the residential area that comes off of Illinois Street. What we're also showing in this scheme is all of these schemes have been predicated upon the library owns one house in this location, has the right to purchase two other houses to expand to two other houses to expand the site to this point, and then they also have the right to purchase two additional houses so that we can get the parking count up higher. This is something that is, I think, not carved in stone. We've talked with the village staff, and they suggested we might not need quite as much parking as we're showing. What we hear in our survey and so forth is one of the #1 issues is we need more parking. So it's something we can work out, but it's something we're budgeting for at this point in time. Right now we're showing parking up here north of the library. That would primarily be staff parking and overflow parking at this point in time. But if we take all the staff parking out of here, most times it's going to free up a lot of space for the downtown parking. Next slide, please. We also talked, as we were going through this, we started talking about the exterior of the building. And it's pretty clear we wanted to do a masonry building. And we started talking about some of the overall broad things you can do with masonry. These are some different buildings that we've done in the past. It's not the best projection here, but you know, there are different colors of brick. This is something at the University of Illinois, every building's the same color. One of the issues you run into down there is the buildings get bigger, that dark brick starts to become pretty massive. This was a museum that we did that you can't have any windows in. So one of the things you can do is use stone detailing and patterning in the bricks and things to kind of bring more life to the facades. This is another building. Sometimes the really light buildings take on a little bit of an institutional quality. You can break that down with the massing, but it's something to watch out for. This in-between brick is something that we're quite fond of. It's kind of a softer form brick. It's a molded brick rather than a machined brick. It gives you a little softer feel to the building. And it's one way to kind of bring a more traditional feeling to a building. So along the way, we've been looking at the main street and the way it's developed. This building on the far left here is not falling down. It's in the middle of construction. And we really like that brick that's on the, was it the trolley building?
Trolley barn.
Yes, and we really like that brick. It's very soft and warm. One of the things that's really nice about it is you can see right there in the sun, it kind of glows in the sun. One of the big advantages of our building is we have a great southern exposure kind of on the new library building. It really is going to take on a lot of sun. The facade will really come to life with daylight on it. That's true of half of your main street. It really shows up in the brick patterning as well. I think as we look at the more traditional part of Main Street, we see some things that we like the idea of. This very strong cornice line that runs around most of the buildings down there. These old buildings were built differently. They have very thick walls. You could get really heavy shadow. We're going to have trouble getting that heavy shadow. We're going to have to use more pattern and things to kind of replicate that, but we want to get some of that shadow into it. Another thing is we see stone being used selectively. There's not stone buildings so much, but there's stone detail and trim, little things to add a little bit of character to the building in all these locations. And then we see these arches that are set in masonry. They're not necessarily glazed in arches. They're arches that are there as kind of almost a pattern work, and it's something that really appealed to us as well. Take the next slide. So this is the rendering of the library, looking from the downtown area to the library. I think you can see across the top, we took the cornice line very seriously. We've got kind of that patterned cornice, stone trim across the top. There's We also worked in some of the arch work into the facade of the building. In this case, at the entrance, it's got glass behind it. You can see through it. It becomes kind of a feature point of the building. On the rest of the building, it's more of a pattern work similar to downtown. One of the things you notice here is there's a lot of glass in the facade. This is typical of newer libraries compared to older libraries. Again, it's a different way of using it. And when you spend a lot of time in buildings, they like to have more natural light. It's more of an active space. It's not necessarily the quiet recluse that libraries used to be. They're very active buildings. You want more light. You also want to be able to see into them. You want to see the activity that's going on in the space. So it's something that's become a feature of library design. Next slide. And this is where we have a movie. If you could run the, I shouldn't say movie. That's expecting too much. An animation. This is a 3D visualization of the library. And we're on Route 59 right now. You can see the front. You can see on the front, one of the things we talked about the library was introducing these very subtle curves. It's actually segmented straight pieces. We're not curving the glass, but it provides a softening to the whole facade and a little more life to it. Something we thought worked out quite well. Here you can see the stone patterning when it's in the solid area. It reads more like that stone that's downtown. This is along Illinois Street. There's the drop-off, and we just went through someone's house. There's a covered drop-off here for books. We're back to Route 59. The brick patterning wraps the corner here. The first story is more solid in this area because that's staff area. It's not as open. And as we look on it, we're back at the parking lot side. We can go back to the other presentation. And just next slide. So these are some still details from it. So on the first floor, we kind of, in the staff areas, we have smaller, narrower windows, a little bit more privacy, also able to be broken up into smaller offices and so forth. We've got more of the stone trim and things that's down kind of at the human level. You could read that very readily. The upper areas are kind of almost a two-story read, the way we've set back the windows. And we have the cornice around the top. Next, please. This is from the north. You can see that patterning, the brick pattern that wraps the corner, and also the one-story setback around the building. It's a little early to guarantee this, but one of the things we're looking at, if we can make the budget and everything work, is to introduce some green roof along that level. Both for a sustainability notion, also it softens things as you look out the windows onto these spaces. Next slide, please. So here you can see the kind of brick patterning between the windows and along the top. This is more of the service area of the library, but there's still a lot of glazing and so forth that take place. Next slide, please. This is where the drive comes out onto Illinois Street. This is where the double height meeting room space is. And window at the corner. This end of the building is a little quieter. We know we're facing the residential area. We didn't want to have huge expanses of glass. It's more regulated at these ends. But we've broken up all the facades with some glass along the way so you just aren't facing blank walls. Next slide, please. And then this is back to the main view again. Next. So these are what we call elevations. They're flat line drawings that are rendered of the building. It gives you kind of how you can see there's how things break down. Next slide, please. Relatively narrow building, and that's something that is good for sustainability. It allows a lot of light to penetrate into the building along the long axis. It's something that we have to control, but we can also manipulate to reduce energy loads. Next slide. Just showing you the north side of the building, which you could consider the back of the building, but it's not being treated as such. It's developed in the round. It's active. It has windows. We're not really trying to face any blank walls up against residential properties. Next. And this is the quieter facade that occurs along Illinois Street. Next. And then this is what the building looks like at night. You say dusk. This is projecting a little darker than the actual drawing, but it's one of the things where you can see into the building, you can see activities. It really becomes the sign for the building in a way. And you can see the arched entranceway here and the arches silhouetted in the corner here. And that's a summary of everything, and we're open to questions. Julie can You want to take architectural questions first, or you want to?
No, we'll do it all at once. Hi, everybody. I'm Julie. I'm the library director. Most of you probably know me already. So who here remembers 1990? It was an awesome year, wasn't it? It was the year they broke ground on the existing library. And it was 25 years ago when that construction began. And the official population of the Plainfield Library District in 1990 was just over 14,000 people. And there were 5 schools in District 202. Today, the library serves over 75,000 people, and there are 30 schools in District 202. We are serving our 5 times as many patrons with that same 27,000 square foot building that we broke ground on in 1990. When we opened that building, the library had 2 word processing computers. We still had typewriters for public use. Our collections included cassettes and VHS tapes. Modern email didn't even exist. And today, not only do we have dozens of public computers, we provide more than 23,000 hours of public computing time annually. We also provide Wi-Fi and power for people to bring their own devices to the library, something never envisioned in 1990. Our formats today include DVD, Blu-ray, MP3, ebooks, e-audiobooks, streaming video, streaming audio, e-readers, Rokus, things that we could never have planned on. But libraries are about access, and format is just one more point of access. We just have many, many more points of access than we did in 1990. The library's physical collection is not as much of a focus. We now have over 200,000 items in the library collection, and that is only possible because we don't have to physically house them all. People are using libraries so much differently today than they did 25 years ago. Librarians are often asked, why do we need libraries in the internet age? Well, the internet can't provide you personalized help and hands-on instruction like a 21st century library can. In 1990, we did 2,500 reference questions answered. In 2015, we did over 56,000 questions answered. 25 times as many questions answered now in the internet age. Today's questions are more complex than ever before because that easy answer is on the first page of Google and you found it yourself. The complex questions, the things that require a lot more hand-holding, hands-on instruction, and help, that's what your librarian is there for. Classes and programs are another huge part of 21st century library services. 1993 was actually the first year that the library collected any kind of program attendance statistics, and they only counted kids. And they had about 2,200 kids come to programs at the library in 1993. In 2015, we had over 50,000 people attend a library program somewhere in Plainfield. And that is 22 times as many people attending a library program. 25 times as many questions answered, 22 times as many people coming to programs. That's what 21st century library services are all about. 21st century library service focuses on continuous learning, on content creation, on making connections between people and among their community. With a smartphone in your pocket that is more powerful than the 1990 supercomputer, people today need help keeping up with the fast-paced changes in technology. They need a place to connect and a place to collaborate, a place to make things and share things. 21st century public libraries are community centers for the way we live today. And our library's been doing a great job in this tiny little building. So what's the urgency? Why do we need this today? Well, it's the age and the condition of the current library building that are forcing this to the forefront. Yeah, it looks good. If you just look at the surface, it looks just fine. But after 25 years of hard use as a public building, the cost of simply keeping it functional continues to rise. Numerous building systems and pieces of equipment are past their expected useful life. They are failing on a regular basis. If this proposed building and expansion project fails at the March ballot, addressing those costly long-term repairs and replacements to keep the building functional will cut into the funds and the space available for library service, reducing them even further. The scope of work needed to keep